Hey everybody, I'm just waiting for my dad to join. Just waiting for my dad to join the call. Hey, what's up, Chris? Hey, what's up, Frat? How you doing, man? Hey, what's happening, everybody? I'm just waiting for my dad to join the call. Hey, what's up, UF Black alumni? Please stick around. Just waiting for my dad to join. We're gonna be talking about the conversation that Black parents have with their children about the police. All right. My dad's joining now. Hey, Butters Burgers, stick around for me. Big conversation tonight. Hey, one in Tampa, about to have a conversation with my father about the conversation
Okay,
that.
so we're connected, I think.
Hey, what's up, Dad?
Hey, Chris, how you doing?
Good. What's up, man? How you doing?
All
You all
right,
right?
all right. So let me.
One
All right, I
position.
see we got a split screen here. I guess that's typically the way this normally functions with a split screen.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, you're
Okay.
perfect. This is good. This is actually the first time I've ever done this, so I'm glad that we were able to figure it out.
Yeah, it's all good. So let me see if I can turn up the volume on your mom's phone here because, again, I don't use her phone all the time. Make sure I'm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So I think I.
Hey, that's what's up, man. This is perfect. You good? Can you
Okay.
hear me and see me well?
Yeah, I can see you.
All right,
So
cool.
is Brandon on as well?
Actually, I just figured out that you can only go live with one person so
Oh,
at a time.
okay.
So what I might do is Brandon's on the live right now, but what I
Yeah.
might do though is depending on the timing and everything, what I'll do is I may we may come to a conclusion in our conversation, and I might bring in Brandon at the very end for the wrap up if there's
Yeah.
time. All right, cool. So I appreciate you being available, Dad. Good evening, everybody. It's June 8th. This is day 4 of 37 conversations. And Dad, as you know, I've been having these conversations relating to this moment that we're in right now as a country, and with the Black Lives Matter movement and all that kind of stuff, and everything surrounding that. And there are different conversations that I've been having with, yourself and Brandon and Mom and other family members and colleagues and friends relating to this moment. So, and one of those conversations has to do with, the conversation that parents of Black children, whether they, be Black themselves or they've adopted Black children or they have interracial children or whatever the case may be, um, that conversation that they have with their children in regards to their engagements with the police and such. And I appreciate you being available today to kind of talk with this. This is really more so like a fireside chat, as a reminder to everybody. This isn't scripted out. My dad and I haven't scripted this out. I haven't provided my dad with any questions or anything like that. So this is just, a conversation that y'all are sitting in on. So we'll get rolling, man. So I, um, I remember specifically during the Obama administration, I'm not sure which unfortunate time it happened that, an unarmed Black motorist or an unarmed Black man was killed by the police or whatever the case may be. And President Obama, in one of his addresses to the nation, spoke about how there was a conversation that Black parents have with their children regarding um, their interactions and engagements with police officers and law enforcement. And as there was a lot of there was a little bit of a fallout from that, maybe regarding just how people digested that and how they received that message. I think that one is basically it's based on just a lack of awareness and understanding of the experience that Black people have in this country. I think it's also a matter of not being empathetic. I think it's also a matter of just not knowing what you don't know, right? And And something I didn't plan on speaking about today was white fragility. So a friend of mine, Brittany Voss, shout out to Brittany. She's following this podcast called White Fragility, and she actually happened to post it on Instagram, and I reposted it today. And then a couple of my friends actually followed up with me, and they said, "What does white fragility mean?" And if you don't know about white fragility, then you should definitely look up that definition. But essentially, white fragility is the like the defensiveness and the uncomfortableness that our white counterparts have when they are presented with issues relating to social justice, racial justice, and just race in general. So I think that, again, when we're talking, we've had conversations before about understanding yourself, understanding the psychology that's related to this moment. And I think it all goes back to empathy, but a part of that is the white fragility piece, I think, as well. So anyway, Dad, I wanted to give you a moment to kind of introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, your military background real quick, and then we'll just kind of just have a conversation about this.
Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. As Chris has probably already told you, he may have said this to some of you in the past, in either posts or maybe in comments. My name is Tim Johnson, and I was born in Charleston, South Carolina. So literally I was born where the first shot of the Civil War was fired. And so I grew up in the South. At about the age of about 11 or so, I moved up to Jersey, and that's where I entered the U.S. Air Force. And from there, I just retired about 12 years ago. I spent 30 years in the Air Force, and I live here now in San Antonio. So I've been to several places around the world. Chris and Brendan, his brother, have grown up in various places overseas in Europe and in Hawaii and other places. So we've gotten to be exposed to a lot of different things, a lot of different people, a lot of different folks with different backgrounds. And so in many ways, our experience has been maybe not as much as emblematic as maybe some of our Black brothers and sisters, but no less, we've never, one thing in our family, we've always made sure that everyone knew who they were, what they were about, what their history was, and to be proud of who they were, and also to take pride and never doubt yourself. And so that's one thing that I tried to instill in both my sons, both my wife and I. We've never told those guys that they had limitations on them or anything they could accomplish in their life. So that's just a brief, I don't want to ramble on about myself, but I'm very blessed. This family has come a long way, especially from my own humble beginnings, but I'm just happy and proud of my two sons and the opportunities that my wife and I have been able to afford them.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Dad. And just a little bit more, to brag on my dad a little bit, I'm very proud of my father. As you said, 30-year retired Air Force, and continues to serve this country, working as a civilian at Randolph Air Force Base. My dad retired as a Chief Master Sergeant. You can't go any higher than that as an enlisted person in the Air Force. I watched my father get his undergraduate degree at the University of Maryland. Growing up, I watched my father get his master's degree at the University of Arkansas. So I'm very, very proud of my father, and I'm very reflective of the person I am today is a reflection of him and my mom. So very, very blessed. So moving along. So just as it relates to, when we had conversations growing up, Dad, and, you hear about, our brothers and sisters who, whether they be Black or other people of color, regarding conversations with, surrounding engagements of law enforcement and such. Where do you think that's from? Where does that come from? Why is that even a necessary conversation to have?
Well, I think the simple answer to that question is basically this. The original sin of this country, obviously, is slavery. So we're talking 401 years ago when the first Blacks were brought to this country in 1619. From that point going forward, you can actually, everything that happens today, everything that's happened since that time can all be traced back to those first 20 slaves that came over on a British privateer ship called the White Lion. So a lot of folks aren't familiar with that. Those guys landed at Jamestown. Those 20 slaves that were brought, the original 20 slaves that were brought to Jamestown, were actually captured from a Portuguese ship. So bottom line is we can all trace our African heritage back to those first 20 slaves that were landed at Jamestown. And so structurally, everything that happened from that point going forward pretty much defines where we are today. And we've been trying to overcome that ever since. So, you know, Blacks in this country have been oppressed and held down, and everything from not being allowed to read, just trying to be kept totally in the dark, totally suppressed, totally made to feel that they were of no self-worth, that they were of no value. So you spin that forward into present 21st century. Yes, we've made progress. Yes, we've achieved a lot of things. Yes, we have a lot more folks in positions of power and authority in this country. But in the end, ultimately, structurally, what keeps a lot of the fire burning on racism and just hatred in general is the fact that you have, and believe me, I have lots of folks who don't look like me, who don't have the same complexion as me, and I have a lot of respect for all people, regardless of the background. So it's not a us against them thing. It's just simply, I think what's happening right now in the country shines a light on the fact that inherently, when you grow up in a family, let's just put it out there, if you grow up in a white family, you already have some benefits that automatically are endowed to you just at birth. One of them is, the primary one is the fact that you're white. I mean, that from its very beginnings, you already have a leg up on somebody else who doesn't look like you, who has a darker complexion than you, who's black, who's brown, simply because our society, again, you have to keep hearkening back to 1619, because from that point forward, the seed has been planted generation after generation after generation that folks have been taught, not all, because not all whites have this this seed within them to just spew forth and just propagate this kind of a superiority or this hatred. But in many ways, that has been handed down like an heirloom in families. It's been passed down from generation to generation that you're better than somebody else. You're superior than somebody else. You're more intelligent than somebody else. So all these things that we have to confront on a day-to-day basis, things like, why do you guys need affirmative action to be able to get into colleges? What's that all about? When are you guys going to stop, acting like you're the folks that are always, so down that you always need a handout? No, it's not a handout. It's again, structurally, you just keep going backward. There were so many things institutionally and structurally put in place to ensure that you could not have the same opportunity. Playing field was not level. Everything from going to schools in the inner city and not having access to the same textbook as a kid, maybe less than 15 miles across town from you, who's got the 6th edition of a book and you're working off of the 3rd edition. So many things have structurally been done intentionally and sometimes unconsciously. And I think it's just one of those things where when you raise your voice about something, sometimes the retort that you get back is, why do you guys never seem to be satisfied? Well, that's because society has tried to convince people of color, Black people, that you should be satisfied. You should be happy. There should be no reason for you to be constantly complaining. Well, again, it misses the point because first off, you're talking from a position of privilege. You're talking from a position from which you don't know what it means to walk around in a Black person's skin and have to deal with, why can't I get a loan for a mortgage? Why can't I go in a store without being followed? How come I can, have enough money to buy a home in a particular part of town? I moved there because I've got transferred from my company, but unconsciously, I might not even be aware of the fact that my realtor might not even take me to a part of town that I'd like to live in, simply because they themselves believe that, A, I'm not going to take this person from a place where, number one, it might be you're not welcome there, and number two, that's for the white side of town, and I'm going to show you houses in this part of the city. A lot of times these things are unconsciously being done, but in many cases they're very much intentional too. So there's lots that I think Blacks have to overcome, and no one's asking for you to give an advantage to Black people. No one is saying we need to have an advantage over anyone else. We just want the same opportunity that everyone else has. So it's not about making, because that's not correct either, or that wouldn't be right either, to have Blacks have more of an advantage over somebody who doesn't look like them. That's not the intent at all. That's not what Blacks want. Blacks just want an equal opportunity, and they want the playing field to be equal, and they want to have the same opportunity. And given that everything else is equal, I should have the same opportunity to enter college just like anybody else, buy a house in any part of the city that I want to, get hired for a particular job, be considered for promotion within a company. All these things that structurally we tend to not be able to break through. And sometimes unconsciously, we don't even realize it's being done until sometimes you just sit back and assess what's really going on. And not to belabor the point, but I think in many ways, folks just have to, number one, don't doubt yourself ever. Just like I always tell my two sons, don't ever doubt what you're capable of, what you can be. If you don't challenge yourself, you'll never know what you're capable of doing. And, you can't hold a good man, and I'll say specifically, you can't hold a good Black man or Black woman down, because they will rise. And I think that's just the thing we always have to keep in our heart, in our mind. We have to have the fortitude. We have to have the stick-to-itiveness to just be present all the time, to always strive and never be, forced to believe or have our mindset change to the perspective of, there are some things we just aren't meant to have. I'm not a believer in that at all.
Right.
If it's out there, we all have an equal opportunity to go out and achieve it and believe in that and realize what we are capable of in our full potential.
That's what's up, Dad. No, I agree with that, man. And so really speaking about, that, some of that historical context and how some of those beliefs and thoughts have transcended time and gone on and such. I think, one, and I'm not trying to, go a different way with this, but yeah, I think that we as a country have not really come to grips with slavery. We haven't come to grips with, the struggle of people of color in this country since then. And that is kind of a big reason as to why we are where we are right now, excuse me. So as it relates to, that historical context and law enforcement and such, how did that inform the conversation that you would have with me and Brandon about, engaging with the police and stuff?
Well, bottom line is this, when you leave your house, when you guys left the house every day, just like even me, as a 61-year-old, when I leave the house, you go out into a world that very much, how should I say, society at large, is specifically the white population, they weaponize being Black. Black is weaponized. So when you go out in public, I can use myself as a perfect example of something that happened to me many, many years ago when I was only about 21 years old. Leaving your mom's house when we weren't even married yet. We were just dating at the time in a place called Jersey City, New Jersey, where I was catching the bus on a public transportation system in the city, leaving her house at about 11:30 one night to get on the bus to go to the part of town that I lived in, which I can plainly and clearly say her part of town was a lot better than mine. But bottom line is, in the middle of the night, 2 Jersey City police officers saw me crossing the street, and I can't make this stuff up. The name of the street was JFK Boulevard, John F. Kennedy Boulevard. So I was crossing that street to catch the bus to go to what's called the PATH terminal, which was the turnaround point for the bus to go back in the direction of town that I lived in. And so these 2 police officers came up, and there was a softball course that was barricading a street. And I happened to be crossing the street to go to that side where that sawhorse was. And the cops just got out of the car and they looked at me and they said, you think you're funny, don't you? And I said, what are you talking about? They said, you think you're funny. How about get that out of the street? And I said, sir, I'm not sure I know what you're talking about. Now, I'm only 30 or so days removed from completing basic training at Lackland Air Force Base. So I had only been in the Air Force completing basic training for about 30 or 40 or so days. So at that moment, I had to make a decision. Am I going to stand there and basically just get into first off, it's dark. It's 11:30 at night. There are 2 white police officers they pull their cruiser up right next to me, and they're standing there talking to me. So I could either stand there and get into a discussion with them and rebel against what they're trying to tell me to do, or I could just say, okay, my goal tonight is to get on this darn bus and get myself out of here and get home. So I had to make a choice at that particular moment. Well, you fast forward to, some, 15 or so years later, when Chris was born, you have to have the conversation that most whites don't have to have with their children. Thank God they don't. The bottom line is the dichotomy is you have two worlds. You have the world where, a black child, or that's young man or young woman, has to be taught how to respond and how to react when they are approached by law enforcement, because we, again, are already viewed as being a problem to start with. And in many cases, you're just walking while being black, and you still could be, rolled up on for something that is totally either fabricated or, just totally off base. And it's like giving them an excuse to use deadly force or to just brutalize you. So, the unfortunate thing is the average white child, not to say that not any white children are told by their parents to be careful with the police, but by and large, disproportionately, blacks in this country and people of color in this country have to have that conversation with their children, simply because they have a total different world that they confront when they leave their home every day. You leave the confines of some place where people love you, people care about you, people want you to come back home and be back home safely. So you're venturing into a whole different world when you leave the confines of home. So you go out there and you're in the world at large, and you are somewhat, having to confront a lot of challenges that, most whites are not going to have to deal with. They can go into Macy's and walk through the store and just be a shopper, a normal shopper. You can't do that in many cases, because you're going to go into the store and automatically someone's walking around every, couple of racks. You look back and the same person's still standing there. You're like, wow, either this person has the same taste that I do, or, or this is just highly coincidental. And usually it's neither of those. It's purposeful. Everything from, going to shop to, again, like I said, going to apply for a job, going to try to get a mortgage for a loan, being passed over for opportunities that you're qualified for. That is the thing that I think is most troubling. And I think hopefully we will probably never totally overcome, but I think we're at a turning point in this country where some of the things that we have to do, some of the conversations that blacks have to have with their children, people of color have to have with their children about how to react and how to respond to law enforcement. Maybe there'll be a day, it's not going to happen overnight. Maybe there'll be a day where that conversation won't be as necessary or needs to be had as frequently. But the point is, there are two different worlds out there that exist for people that look like we do and people who don't, because automatically the benefit of the doubt is given to those who are not people of color. They get that advantage. And so we have to ensure that, our actual existence depends on how we respond in those situations.
Yeah, most definitely. No, I wasn't trying to cut you off. Were you going to say something, Dad?
No.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I agree with that. And I think that's something too, is like there's a defensiveness that gets, I think that's present sometimes when we have these conversations with our white counterparts. Again, it might be the white fragility, it might be just the lack of awareness of it or whatever. But, this isn't to say, just like you just said, this isn't to say that, white people don't have, engagements with the police, or that white parents don't talk to their children about how they engage with the police or whatever the case may be. I had a excuse me, I had a conversation with one of my good friends at work, and he was telling me, this was just last week, I had to run through the office to go grab some stuff, and he was telling me about a circumstance that happened to him. He grew up here in Tampa, around I think Robertson High School or something like that, back in like the 80s or something. But anyway, he's a white dude, and he was mentioning some of the engagements that he would have with police because of the lower socioeconomic community that he was in. He had to deal with more police patrolling and a higher police presence, and sometimes he got roughed up by the police for no reason and so on. So this isn't to say that, no, of course, I know you're not saying this too, but, just for the audience, this isn't to say that we're saying that white people don't have to deal with those things. But by and large, even in some of those circumstances, he communicated that he understood that, like, he didn't get it. He didn't understand why that was happening to him. He had some challenging situations that he was in because he was with some of his black friends sometimes, and he experienced racism, kind of, I guess you can say, third party racism, if you will, because his friends that he was with were being treated differently because they were black, and he was like, nah, forget that. But even aside from that circumstance, even if you do have, our white counterparts who are growing up in environments in which they have engagements with the police, or that they feel as though they deal with police harassment or whatever, I would venture to say that, I don't have empirical evidence for this particular point, but the benefit of the doubt is given in a different way. And also, I think some of those are isolated, right? So, certainly, some of these issues that we're going to discuss this month and that we've discussed already, they intersect with, socioeconomics. So, in lower socioeconomic, communities, they may have a higher propensity for crime and so on. And then you obviously do have, poor white people out there that live in the inner city or whatever the case, and they may have engagements. But I would venture to say from coast to coast, it doesn't matter if you're in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, or you're in Miami, Florida, or you're in Los Angeles, California, or you're in Seattle, Washington. If you're a person of color and you're black, I think there's definitely an anxiety that you experience there. I mean, you talked about an experience that you had, Dad. I can talk about, several of mine, but some of the ones that initially come to my mind are, I can remember living in Niceville, in Florida. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Eglin Air Force Base. My dad was stationed up there. I went to Ruckle Middle School and Niceville High School there. And, living in Blue Water Bay and having Blue Water Bay, for those who aren't familiar, up on the Panhandle of Florida, is around Walton Beach, Destin, Florida, so those are some of the more well-known areas. But anyway, we lived in I would say upper middle class, community, middle class community, whatever the case. And, there were several times where cops would roll up on me and ask me, where are you going? What are you doing here? I'm like, my parents have that house right there, and it's almost hard not to get defensive yourself, right? Because, he's driving it, or she's driving a taxpayer, a car that's paid by taxpayers, funded by taxpayers. Their salary comes from taxpayers. And I'm like, I'm going to my house, that's my car technically, or, not, you get what I'm saying. That's paid from, money that's paid, they're funded through taxpayer money and such. Other circumstance, I've been arrested once. I've been arrested once in my life. In the summer of 2005, I had just gotten accepted to graduate school. Was going to be working on my first master's. I had just gotten a fellowship at the University of Florida as well, sponsored by Coca-Cola. And I was leaving a bar in Gainesville called Rhubarb, and I stepped outside. As soon as I crossed the threshold of that club, I see that a guy that I was inside the club with, this white guy that I knew, that was one of my neighbors in my apartment community. He was getting just dish ragged. He was getting beaten up, and actually, literally, at the time in which I saw him, he was being thrown on the hood of a car. So I run up, and I try to get him off. I try to get him off and pull him off, and he was fighting a Hispanic dude. And at that moment, it happens quick. At that moment, I didn't see him because he was in my six, but this cop pepper sprays me dead in my face, tackles me to the ground. In the process of tackling me to the ground, he slams my head into a bumper of a car, and then throws me to the ground, immediately puts me in handcuffs. I'm trying to communicate to him, telling him I wasn't fighting. I was trying to help my friend break up a fight. My white friends that were with me as well, they were saying the same thing, screaming at the cop, screaming at him. In the process of that happening, he repeatedly started kneeing me in my back. So I'm in a prone position, hands behind my back, on the ground. He's essentially prone over me and keeps repeatedly kneeing me in my back. And in the midst of that, I'm pepper sprayed. I'm disoriented. I don't know, this is happening quick. I didn't know if there was even a cop behind me. He didn't announce himself. But at the point in which I realized I was in handcuffs, I knew what time it was at that point. So then, of course, I get up. They asked me if I want aid. I'm like, no, I don't want aid. That was just me being prideful. I probably should have taken some aid though from the ambulance. But I was like, no, I don't want that. I keep trying to plead my case. You know what I mean? I keep trying to express to him that I was not fighting. My friends keep trying to express to him that he was not fighting. Even the person, the Hispanic dude that was beating up my white friend, was saying, I was not fighting this man. I was not fighting this man. He said that even when because we rode in separate squad cars to Letcher County Sheriff's Office. He even at the jail said, I was not fighting this guy. And they still arrested me, still processed me, never Mirandized me. And I was humiliated. I was humiliated. You know what I'm saying? And I'm thinking to myself, I just got into graduate school. I'm working. I'm a teacher at the University of Florida. You know, there was so much happening in that moment, and the cumulative effect of that was just really, it was hurtful. You know what I'm saying? It was really tough for me. And so this relates to your story, something very specifically, Dad, I wanted to bring up. So then, so I got released the next day. My friends that were with me at the club that night, bailed me out and everything. I didn't, I'm a college student, you know what I'm saying? So I went to, student legal services, got an attorney at the University of Florida. And John Adcock is, I think, the guy's name, a white dude. I remember he went to LSU because I remember seeing his degrees on his wall. But good guy. And I remember, he helped me put my paperwork together to file a complaint against the police department. At that point in time, I don't want to go down this tangent, but at that point in time, there were a lot of these circumstances and issues that Black students at the University of Florida and Gainesville were having with the police, just like this. But at any rate, I may touch on that later on in another conversation. But Mr. Adcock helped me put my paperwork together. Draft some well worded and very descriptive a complaint against the police department. I had already filed one, which was already in process, but then I was like, let me go get a lawyer. So anyway, and one thing that he's a white guy, but even he said, he's like, listen, these are the cops investigating the cops, man. He's like, your complaint's going to internal affairs. These are the cops investigating the cops. So, I hope that you don't have, I don't want to get your hopes up, but I'm just making sure that you're aware of, how confident I'm in moving forward with this. Anyway, at any stretch, though, there was an investigation. The cop was found to have arrested me unjustly. The charges were dropped. But going back to what you said, Dad, about that conversation about this experience that you had when you were in Jersey City, you're forced to take it, man. There's a very strong power dynamic that happens that's present there. They're armed. They have batons. They have non-lethal resources that oftentimes they don't use, but I shouldn't say that. They have non-lethal resources that at times they use or don't use, or whatever the case may be. But you do know they have a gun, they have a baton. That stuff could kill you. You know what I'm saying? So when you're getting hurt, and that was my one experience. I know people who've had multiple experiences with the police in that regard, and you're forced to just take it. But however, by the time that, I file my paperwork and I go to a lawyer and I get them to help me out and all this other stuff, I've already been arrested. You know what I mean? I've already been handcuffed. I've already been pepper sprayed. I've already been kneed in the back, which throughout the course of the investigation, the policeman, he said that I utilized police protocol police allowed knee thrust to the back. Okay. I was not resisting in any capacity. I had witnesses that spoke to this. But at any rate, by the time that, and if you're fortunate enough to not have been harmed in a significant way by that law enforcement officer, or even killed by the law enforcement officer, and you maybe get recourse for, in my sense, my charges were dropped, and I think his file got dinged or whatever. Going back to my original point, by that point in time, I've already been arrested. I've already been pepper sprayed. I've already been essentially being beaten up. You know what I'm saying? I've already had to go to jail and strip down and be searched. I've already had to go to a jail cell, wear prison clothing. I've already had mug shots. That is humiliating. All because an officer at times can't have discretion or utilize discretion, or even in the moment, take an assessment of the situation. When there are so many people that were, in my particular instance, that were speaking about, okay, sir, this guy wasn't fighting. And when he visibly saw the person that was engaged in the fight was saying, sir, this guy was not fighting, and you're still going to arrest me. It's moments like that I think that can really have a significant impact on the lives of people in this country, whether it be white, Black, Asian, Hispanic, whatever the case may be, because you're entering the system. You know, you're entering the system at that moment. And again, at that time, I was the teacher at UF. In grad school, I just got my undergraduate degree. I was working on my first master's, like, you know, and I'm fortunate that, you know, I was able, you know, that moment in time didn't define me. That moment didn't define me. It didn't break me. I was frustrated and I was hurt. I was very physically and emotionally, but, those instances, I mean, I think that police officers, they know their power, but I think that some maybe don't know their power. And then also citizens in our community may not be familiar with their power either, because it's at that moment that those charges are filed. At that moment, those charges are filed. So then you have to rely upon the legal system or justice system to do the right thing. And many times that, you know, sometimes I shouldn't say many, I shouldn't speak in absolute, so forgive me for that. But, you know, sometimes there are miscarriages of justice as it relates to people of color as well. So, you know, I know we're kind of going long here tonight, but, you know, I think that it gives, you know, there's credibility, there's credence to this, there's merit to this conversation that people of color have with their children about engagements with police. And then, you know, it should come as no surprise that there's anxiety. It should come as no surprise that there's a potential distrust. You know, you don't have to even be arrested, you know, just the harassment, you know, which is what happened to you in your circumstance. So, you know, when I was growing up, you know, I think that one thing I have an appreciation for, Dad, is that, you know, we just had reality. You know what I'm saying? Like you didn't shelter us, you know, you didn't try to color a picture. You just gave it to us real and said, listen, this is a circumstance. Because something that, you know, we've even spoken about recently, our rules of engagement with police officers is just different. The rules of engagement are just different. It is what it is. That's not a chip on the shoulder. That's not a monkey on the back. That's not anything like that. It's just the reality. So, you know, we have to be cognizant and, you know, a little more than probably our white counterparts. You know, no sudden moves. You know, if you're in your car, you know, there's even friends of mine that say, I take my key out of the ignition, or today we have a keyless entry. I'm sorry, push button start. They put their windows down, put their keys on the car. They automatically put their hands out the window. They don't want any trouble. They don't want any problems. There's a person I used to work with named Pam. You know, shout out to Pam, but she gave me something called a pullover pal. Actually, she's an educator, and one of her old students who was a black guy, he actually designed this thing called Pullover Pal, and I encourage people to look it up. And it's basically a pouch. I wish I would have brought it in with me for this call, but it's a pouch that has all your information in it for your car, your registration, important papers or documents, your insurance information, whatever, so that, and you keep it in the door of your car so that if you're pulled over, you can just pick that up, have that, and you can place it against the window and it's right there. So no one can say that, you know, oh, well, like in Philando Castile's circumstance, oh, he was reaching for something, even though Philando Castile mentioned to the police officer that he had a licensed weapon in the car registered and that he was just, you know, reaching for it or whatever. I can't remember the specific circumstance in that situation, but you get what I'm trying to state there, so that there's no sudden moves, so that there's no, you know, nothing that you can be confused as to being a threat to them, to that particular law enforcement officer at that time. I mean, just think about that. The fact that something like that even has to exist because it's to protect you. You know, an apparatus or a resource of that kind is simply to make sure that, you know, you aren't deemed or seen as being a threat or it's to help you and to aid you so you can put your information up to the window. So I know I'm rambling a little bit at this point, and I know we're going long here, but I definitely, I'll kick it to you to close up, Dad. But I will say, you know, that I appreciate your time this evening. I think this is a conversation that's critical. I'm not sure how many of my white friends have ever seen their black friends talking about engagement with the police and everything like that. I thought it was a good conversation. You know, we were able to share some of our shared experiences with law enforcement. Other thing, because I think sometimes you have to over-explain yourself sometimes. One other thing I want to say is, you know, you always kept it real with us. You and Mom always kept it real with us. And it was never in a sense of the police were never the enemy. You know, we were never told that the police were ever the enemy. We were never told that, you know, they didn't have your best interests at heart, even though sometimes maybe they don't. That was never communicated to me. It was always about being careful, coming home safe, and, you know, don't give them a reason to think that you're doing something that you're not doing and thinking that you're a threat. So yeah, so I'm good with that, Dad. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to add before we cut off, but I know we're going kind of long tonight.
Yeah, no, it's all good. You know, yeah, well, first off, I appreciate the opportunity to share some comments with folks that you have on here and as well. But bottom line is, I think, like I mentioned the other night when we were talking, you know, I've been around a little while. You know, I think 61 years is a significant amount of time to have experienced a lot of things and seen a lot of things. And I really hope in my heart, and I kind of feel in my heart too, that what we're experiencing right now in the country, I'm not a supporter of destruction of property, violence. Those things don't accomplish what it is. It loses sight of what the overarching goal is, which is to get us, not just in this country, but around the world, to a place where humanity can be at the forefront of every engagement people have with each other. That's what it's all about. So I really feel in my heart that this moment feels a little different than other moments that in my life I've actually been in a situation to have been alive to actually witness happening. I was only 10 years old when Martin Luther King got assassinated, but I do remember that very vividly in my mind. Lots of changes and lots of things have happened since that time, and even leading up to that time with Medgar Evers and a whole lot of other folks who paved the way, including Malcolm X. I mean, all these folks have they have a place in history for what their ideal was, which was for the equality of Black people, brown people, and just people in general. So I don't want to narrow my focus here, but the whole point is, what I'm trying to say is, I think what I see happening right now in this country with young people, older people, middle-aged people, Black and brown people, Asian, Hispanic, white, I really believe that we are at a pivotal point right now in our country's history where we might really be on the cusp of seeing some real significant change with regard to race relations in this country. And I think all of us just need to take that on as a challenge. And it's not just for whites to do, it's for all of us, including Black and brown people, to do their part as well, to make sure that they are going about things the right way and that they are expressing themselves in a way that is worthy of the cause that they're fighting for, so that you don't diminish not just all who came before, who struggled and gave, in many cases, their life for what it is that we are still struggling for and fighting for, but for the generation that you yourself are a part of. We all need to make sure that we, are carrying that torch in a respectful way. And I do believe that with the groundswell of participation that I see going on around the country, and the persistence of what's happening with people actually showing up daily to make their voices heard and to ensure that folks understand that this is not going away. Yes, there's something called fatigue. People can get burned out, and sometimes you wonder, will the candle extinguish itself here in another week or so, and people will just go back and just reset and regress back to where they were before and not even do anything except say, well, I walked around for a couple of weeks with a sign, but now let's get back to business of business as usual. Well, hopefully that's not going to happen. I certainly don't have a crystal ball, but it just feels different. This particular situation, this particular time in our history feels dramatically different. And I'd like to believe in my heart, and I pray that God is making this change in what we see happen in this country, that this is going to be a catalyst for a permanent discussion of how we improve and how we move forward and how we can stop regressing, which I know is impossible, but I really believe this is a watershed moment. And I just hope that all of us, including myself and all the folks who you have joined in here, we all just take this moment for what it is and realize that right now you're witnessing something that's so critical. And this moment in time, right now, our country has gone through some cataclysmic things right now. Economically, we got 40 million plus people out of work. We have a pandemic going on. We have a social uprising going on, not just in this country, but globally. People all around the world are actually looking at what happened to George Floyd and taking this as a call to action. So bottom line is, this is an important moment, and we need to actually treat it as such, and we need to be respectful of it, and we need to keep our foot on the gas. And so that's probably how I would sum up my feelings about what's happening right now. We just need to make sure that, you know, we don't go fall asleep at the wheel on this one. Keep going, keep pressing, keep believing, and just be dauntless at this.
I hear that, man. That's what's up, Dad. Well, I love you very much. I hope you have a good evening. I appreciate you making some time. I know you were out there working out and stuff.
Yeah, love you too.
Mom's around.
Huh?
Mom's around.
Yeah, Mom's here.
All right, Mama. Oh yeah, I know you're gonna be off the camera, Mom. No, she probably don't want to.
She's right here.
Oh, okay. All right, Mama. All right, love you. You take
Love
it
you
easy.
too.
All right, Dad. Give a hug and kiss to Mom.
All right, Chris.
All right.
Yeah, I'm proud of you, and I think just like the example I gave of all of us trying to do whatever we can and do our part, you know, even you know, these 37 conversations you're having, it's moving the discussion, it's moving the ball forward, it's being a part of the solution and not being someone who's just sitting on the sideline whining and complaining and bemoaning why your situation is or isn't what it is, or how much it could be, how much better it could be. So I'm proud of you too for also realizing the moment that you're in, like you always do, and also just embracing it and trying to be a positive force for change.
I appreciate it, Dad.
Yeah. All right, Chris, I love you, and have a good night. Be safe out there.
I love you too, Dad. Peace.
All right, we'll see you.
See ya.